Hey out there, this is Friday, June 30th, last day of June 2017, and it's just about 9:35 almost in the morning here in Northern California. And talk about the usual stuff. Um, Consternation has been on my mind, this term consternation. And I want to focus on some of the reasons. I know with the heat we've been getting around here, which is pretty standard, I mean, it gets very uncomfortable. One might say punishing, brutal, a lot of adjectives to describe the unpleasantness of this oppressive heat. And it does tend to fill one with a sense of consternation, almost like you're angry with God, because we're told on one hand that this is a loving God that is all powerful, holy, competent, holy with a W, holy, competent, and he can do anything, and purportedly he loves us. So it does shake the faith of the most staunch believer out there. And it's an intriguing situation because it's one that we really want to find a way out of. But we are frustrated because we don't know a way out. And so we just live with this impending sense of foreboding, unpleasantness. And we're being affected not from just the organic things we can't get away from, things like oppressive weather or natural disasters that can bring that same sense of consternation. But there's also the aspect of unnaturally induced consternation. And there's a correlation between the attitude that one can cop because of this consternation that we all have to face just as being humans. It's hard to be human. I mean, we're very vulnerable. We're very susceptible. It's a very tenuous existence, very precarious, touch and go, our very existence is. And so it's unsettling for the strongest of hearts and minds out there. And God knows that, luckily, thankfully. God understands that. So we can turn to God for understanding at those times and say, God, I don't like this feeling. It's like I don't even like myself for having these feelings. I kind of hate myself for having these feelings of uneasiness that I know the reason for. And it's so important that people know the reason for things like punishing heat, when we do have an all-loving God and we do have an all-powerful and holy, competent God, okay? But what happened is something went terribly wrong, and it's essential, absolutely crucial, imperative that the whole world understands this fact. And I don't think hardly anybody does, really. Do they understand about our fallen state as a species? Do they understand that there was a point where God wished he didn't even create us? We've got to understand that fundamentally. And that's got to be parroted over and over. And we got to talk about this stuff, that we're screwed up, man, from from Jump Street. And, this is a serious thing that we have to address. We have to confront. We have to acknowledge, and we have to adjust our own attitude about things that bring the consternation. Accordingly, we have to adjust our attitude because it's a big deal. Okay, it makes all the difference in the world to understand this point I'm trying to get across. Is to know that, look, somehow, okay, this forbidden fruit, whatever it's a metaphor, analogy for, it was a very serious thing, what happened. And so we have to face that fact. that God was so displeased that he actually wished he didn't create us, but he didn't give up on us. He set a plan into motion in his great boundless mercy to redeem us, because otherwise he could have just blanked us out of existence and we wouldn't have any history. We wouldn't have any lineage. So whatever it was bad, but it wasn't something that he couldn't see fit to forgive in his own way and in his own time. And that's why this thing is being drawn out these thousands of years. It's all being drawn out. But see, if we don't understand that, then there's a tendency to blame God and think that, anybody that believes in God is just, they're just wishful thinking. They're being fanciful. Yeah, it's a nice notion, but, they won't talk about these things, which are important to talk about. Why we have the stinging insects, why we have disease, why we have death. Okay, and none of these things were meant to be here. Nothing unpleasant. We brought death to all the other creatures. That's why it's written in Scripture that all creation groans under the weight of sin unto this day. So we're all walking around with a sense of consternation that the only way we can understand it and have any kind of solace in this matter is to turn to God and say, God, help me. And you find out that the way that God helps you is when you help other people. Okay, when you become an agent of the Spirit of truth, the comforter, the counselor, the encourager, the sustainer. That's the Spirit of truth, the Spirit of God. That is what it is. It's the Holy Spirit. And it's there all the time, available to all of us. We all have equal access because we're equal. We're equally beloved by God, equally blessed. This is the way it is. And there's no competition with God. It's not like Jesus set out to be, the prince of the world and to be found worthy to have all authority over the affairs of men. Okay, but this is what he got. This is what was handed to him. This is his commission. So he is entrusted and he is endowed with that power, and it's rightful power, and it's going to go to him completely in the very near future. But we're in the interim period, 2,000 years ago approximately, when he was crucified and he raised to life, and then the plan carries on. You see, God gave us this big dose of grace and mercy so that we could get our act together. That's what it's all about. It's about God being gentle with us and giving us all his time so that we could get our act together and be the children he wants us to be a fragrant aroma in his nostrils, to use a metaphor for what he's after. But he wants us to seek to please him. Then we realize it's about seeking to please others, to helping others. As we help others, God gives us more help. And the grace of God just abounds more and more and more as we need it. And we do need it. We all need it. I've never felt more of a need to escape from this scene than ever before. I mean, there's been plenty of periods in my life where I wish I could just crawl in a hole and die. I didn't want to deal with reality, face whatever we call reality. Okay, and I wanted to blast off, to use a metaphor, just, beam me up, Scotty kind of thing, and get out of this thing, waltz off the stage, to use a line out of the Three Dog Night song, what's the name of that song? I can't remember it, but anyhow, it was a very popular song there for quite a while. But anyhow, I think the point I'm trying to make here it has been made. And I just think that everybody that hears me needs to just, talk to somebody, comfort somebody, encourage somebody, even if you're not in the mood, just remembering why you may not be in the mood. Because there's another form of consternation that's brought on by the rulers of this world. And just to read from, let's see, it's it's Ephesians. Ephesians 6, chapter 6, verses 12 through 13. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And then verse 13 says, Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. This is the King James Version, which most people consider pretty much, the most well-kept translation, and I like it. I like the red letter edition Bible, so then you can always just read, if you just want to read what Jesus taught, you can just read all the red, and it's not a burden at all because it's redundant too, because there's different accounts from different disciples, and it's a fascinating read, the Old and New Testament. But everybody should have Bible knowledge so that they can share it with other people and help people understand why we have the problems that we have in this world, the stuff that we can't fix, that's not political, social, or economic based, like the stuff that I'm always talking about. But it does merge. It is all kind of a big, hazy, nebulous mess now because they've conflated it on purpose. Who are they? It's these same people. It's against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And who is that? We're talking about the money printing class in collusion, in direct collusion. Right behind the money printing class is this political class, these high ranking politicals that illegitimately, and I say illegitimately because they're going against the will of the people. Over 90% of the American people were against the bailout of '08, and yet it went through. This would have been capitalism in action to let it go through. The American people knew that intuitively, instinctively. We knew that. A market correction is what that would have been. And it was high. It was way overdue. Okay, they had dumped way too much money on the housing market. All these phony appraisals. I mean, the appraisers working for the banks. The conflict of interest reached the highest as heavens. I mean, the collusion from the different special interest groups out there that wanted to manipulate the cost of housing upward. I mean, and then we got the media involved and the government's involved. It becomes fascist. It becomes a big conspiracy because the media we depend on for accurate education, and they've been giving us anything but. But this is the other form of consternation. This is the one that I feel like I really need to spout off about. I don't get mad at God anymore because of the brutal heat and the miserable cold and the accidents because gravity and atomic structure is now deadly. This would explain it. I'm not saying we don't need some gravity, okay, but so we're not floating around, okay, but not so it's deadly, and the atomic structure is far inferior to what it could be if you just use your imagination. You could see that you could have an atomic structure that's imperishable. That's what's talked about. That's the promise about being found worthy to inherit a renewed earth, that Jesus takes over the controls of the affairs of men. Then wonder what the economic system is going to look like. But I know I digress there a little bit, but explaining what what's going on here is really important, and to understand the difference between the different kinds of consternation. I mean, one, we've got to be very clear that organic one is what we brought upon ourselves. Our ancestors did through the original sin, this knowledge of good and evil, and hence the fall of man and the curse that befell the whole earth, where thorns, where roses began to grow thorns, and all the disease, the death, and the atomic structure being far inferior and getting disease and death and all this stuff. Okay, this all came. That's that organic thing. That if you're going to blame anybody, you got to blame God. But then you got to blame yourself. You got to blame your ancestors for being so stupid. I mean, if humanity now, with that knowledge, had another choice and said, look, you have the choice to know good and evil, or you can reject knowledge of good and evil, or you can reject it. I mean, no way, I'm not touching it. I'm saying, no, God, I'm in bliss right now. Okay, I don't want to change this at all, right? And that's what most people would do. Unfortunately, history doesn't go that way, so it's not that simple. So it requires this long period of time to draw itself out. Now, back on the economic stuff, how these people work, and this bogus facade, this lie, this deceit, this untruth that we've been told, that high prices for anything is good, we need to really question. And this is what's been shoved down our throats, though. Okay, they went against the will of the people. I mean, if we're going to go back in time, and to bring up Jerome Corsi again with his going after this money that was spent on Obamacare and stolen from the investors in the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, these mortgage pools. What these are just cute little names they gave these big government private conglomerate of loans. They pooled all these mortgages together just to consolidate and simplify, what these people love to do. They don't want competition, so they love to consolidate. It's this centralization, this new world order. Okay, so this is the way they operate. I learned this from learning real estate, and so look, I say, that's minutia. That's excruciating minutia in the scheme of things. The fact that we needed a market correction in 2008. Okay, we needed it badly. Okay, and it was very deserving that a lot of people ate crow. Okay, they got caught holding the bag and they went down in flames. That's what would have happened. We would have had a market reset, and we would have had an entirely different social, economic, political paradigm in America. Okay, but these evil people wouldn't let it happen.